Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's Ag Forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions, your premier platform for real-time global insights. Well, this past weekend may have rivaled some of our weekends back in April and May and early June in terms of weather activity, and a lot of it was blamed on the flow pattern you see here. This is early in the morning on Monday, showing you the position and strength of the jet stream, and it is highly amplified and features two specific things that are creating some of the most active weather across much of the United States right now. One is the giant ridge that you see tucked away right down here over the south central part of the United States, and also this deep trough without ahead of it some very strong upper level winds. And inside that area I just circled there, we have the best upper level support for producing large low pressure systems. So let's take a look at what this pattern gave us here. I want to start off first by showing you 7 o'clock tonight what the upper level trough ridge pattern is going to look like. And specifically, I want to hone in on the height anomaly. So I'm going to zoom in right here just to show you the United States. And I want you to see this number right in through here, 5950. That's circling parts of Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Missouri. And if we go into that area and look at the historical values of the height of the 500 millibar surface in the atmosphere. In other words, this just tells us how thick the atmosphere is. Well, we're going to be breaking some record here in terms of all of our sounding data. So we launch weather balloons and they tell us what the height of those levels are. And I just want you to see right up here where I've indicated with an arrow, this would be, later on today, this would be the highest 500 millibar height on record in several of the locations that I just circled for you there. But this is particularly from Little Rock, Arkansas. Now with a ridge that dominant, this is what ends up happening. Underneath it, we have incredibly warm temperatures. In fact, that's why the ridge exists, because the thickness of the atmosphere is a result of the heat within it. And so we see temperatures getting deep into the 90s across a broad section of the southern and southeastern part of the United States under that ridge, while on the northwestern side of the U.S., we're talking about much colder temperatures. We'll get to that in a few moments. Here's the other consequence of a ridge like that. Over the last 30 days, look at the deficit in rainfall we have seen in parts of Texas, but stretching all the way from basically the lower Mississippi River Valley up the east coast of the United States. When we compare things to normal, it's been very, very dry in those areas, except for where hurricanes have come in. Meanwhile, on the other side of this, things have been exceptionally wet. Parts of Montana, North Dakota here, we're off my chart here, and this goes up to 550% of normal rainfall. But along the boundary of where that trough and ridge pattern sits right in through here, we saw some extremely heavy rain over the weekend. So looking at the last 72 hours of total accumulated precipitation, let's just focus in on where the two air masses were colliding, which was right there across parts of northern Missouri, southern Iowa, then stretching through central and northern Illinois, getting into northern Indiana and southern Michigan. Places in there, it was common to see 2 to 3 inches, with some locations picking up well over 6 inches of rainfall. And this amount of rain in this area has been devastating for the end of season crops grown here. And harvest efforts are going to be delayed as things are just sitting underwater right now. Now, some of the storms that came through were quite impressive. I went out chasing last night. This was one of the supercells that moved through central Illinois. I'm actually just south of Champaign here. And you're about to see the rear flank downdraft come over and get me. And watch the fountain in the middle there. You're going to see it start to get blown to the right. There it goes. Now the RFD is over the top of me. This storm tried as it was spinning here to produce a tornado, but never did, thankfully, as it moved across east central Illinois. My neighbor, Bella Chapman, went out chasing with her dad, Bill Chapman. And I want you to see something pretty amazing here. She caught in slow motion a lightning strike. And you can actually count the number of return strokes with this one. Are you ready? So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 right there. 11 return strokes all in that same channel. And all of this happened in under a second. Incredible to see the lightning on the leading edge of this. But I think the winner for the most photogenic supercell of the night goes to my colleague Andrew Pritchard, a fellow meteorologist at Nutrien Ag Solutions, who caught this supercell again in Champaign County. These were just a few of the powerful storms that went through. Now, on the other side of that temperature gradient, we saw this Saturday morning. This was 6:45 a.m. Central Time Saturday morning temperatures. And I want to zoom in here on the north central part of the United States, where we did see some frost in some places in parts of North Dakota and northern Minnesota. Even though you see some of the temperatures there in the low 30s, lower lying ground, lower elevations here did dip down below freezing. And so this was the first taste of some frost. Now they're not getting it again this morning because as that big low pressure system goes pulling out of Montana and goes up here toward the Hudson Bay, they're back in the warm sector of this storm, and a lot of warm air is moving to the north, and some of that air will certainly destabilize and give us a severe weather threat. But go back to the west, here to Great Falls, Montana, and look at the snow we got over the weekend. So impressive to see these snowfall totals. They range anywhere from between 16 and 18 inches on the high plains and much higher in the mountains. We can see here by looking at the last 72 hours of total snowfall what some of those numbers look like in Montana. And the snow is not yet done for that area. And by the way, I know this map has a hard boundary there on the U.S.-Canada border, but this snow goes into parts of southern Alberta, into Saskatchewan. And we saw here in Waterton some snowfall amounts approaching 1.5 feet. And this was just on Saturday, and it's been snowing ever since then as well. So this has been a very active system in this highly amplified pattern. And I told you this map would get a lot more colorful, and this is what we're looking at just today from our all hazards weather map. Early morning severe storms here in parts of the north central plains. I would expect to see these flood watches can extend all through this area, and the winds on the backside of this storm are going to be quite ferocious as well. We still do have a blizzard warning in parts of Montana, but before I get into this forecast, I at least want to make sure it's very clear how bad the frost that you see in this area is. That's not a frost, that's a hard freeze warning. And that's because if we look at the Monday morning temperatures, this will be later on as the sun is starting to rise out west, we're going to be seeing some very productive regions. I'm talking about down there in the Columbia Basin, the Snake River Valley, specifically cities like Yakima, Walla Walla, and then all of the cities that kind of line the Snake River Basin are having they have a hard freeze warning out right now. So this is much below average in terms of temperatures and could be very detrimental to crops in that area. And not to leave anybody out, but I got to show you what happened in California. There was a supercell here with a well-defined hook echo on the back side of it that was just to the west of Sacramento near Davis. And this guy went out and chased it. Okay, so I had to at least let you hear what Brennan caught here. But this was an amazing event here in Northern California to see a supercell here going through this field. Now, I apologize. I don't know what is being grown right there. So if someone could please in the comments tell me what is grown in that field. But this particular tornado, a rare sighting in Northern California. And I'm not done, okay? This was on the other side. We have Lorenzo. Hurricane Lorenzo is now the easternmost Category 5 strength hurricane on record, and it is going to be going north toward the British Isles, toward Ireland, causing problems by the middle and end of this week. And that was just your weekend. Let's now get into the forecast. This is what we're looking at early this morning in terms of lightning strikes. So on the warm front that's out ahead of this deep low pressure system sitting here, a lot of severe weather early this morning, including, as you see here, about 20,000 lightning strikes across the United States here, but most of them concentrated in parts of Minnesota, North and South Dakota, into northern Wisconsin. So that's where the early morning storms are located. And I said this storm system's honestly still just getting going. Well, this is basically the last day or so of infrared satellite imagery. And you can see how deep that upper level low is spinning out in the western part of the United States. Moving forward with this forecast, this system ejects and moves here toward the Hudson Bay. We have a tropical system that's coming up here. See it? That is going to interact on the periphery of this upper level ridge that sits right in through here, pumping in moisture, tropical moisture coming from the Pacific, from the Atlantic, and that's going to target this region for some very, very heavy rainfall moving forward. Here's what it looks like just through your next 5 days. So stretching from New Mexico through the panhandles of Texas, through Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, southern Wisconsin, that will be the corridor on which we see the heaviest rainfall. You can see the influence of the ridge over the southeast, keeping things in this area on the whole relatively dry. And again, a lot of this here, that is falling as snow as this first of several systems exit here toward the Hudson Bay. So that is the bigger picture, part of the forecast through the next 5 days here as to where we're expecting the heaviest rainfall. Flood threat in through this corridor, very, very high throughout this week. Now, in terms of our storm threat, on Monday here, Storm Prediction Centers highlighted a couple areas of marginal risk. So we're going to be watching the main frontal boundary stretching through here, and also the storms coming up on that tropical moisture into New Mexico and Texas. By the time we get into Tuesday, our frontal boundary just stalls right in through here around this ridge. So we're going to be watching for an active storm, active thunderstorms in through this quarter, especially then getting up into upstate New York. And getting into Saturday, it's much of the same thing. It's all around this ridge that we're watching for the return flow. That's kind of our ring of fire setup here for the next 3 days. At least right now, as of early in the morning on Monday, Storm Prediction Center didn't pick up on any regions that were in the slight, enhanced, or even moderate risk, which is good. But let's take a look at what rainfall is going to look like. This is the 0Z NAM, and we're going to play this out, getting us to early in the morning on Wednesday. And you see the pieces that we just described kind of unfolding here. Early morning storms in north central United States, moving back over into parts of Michigan and here into the the eastern part of the Ohio River Valley. Now, the bigger storm system is still just now emerging into, parts of Saskatchewan. And we can see that later on in the day today, more precipitation coming into parts of North Dakota. And remember from earlier in the video, this is an area that over the last month has seen 500% of normal rainfall for the end of the season here. Well, as time goes on, we notice this. You see the main quarter on which our precipitation is forming right in through here. In fact, if I just kind of play it, you can even see the circulation of the atmosphere circulating in a clockwise fashion around this high, and it's right in through here that we're expecting the heaviest rainfall throughout the day on Tuesday, getting into Wednesday morning. See that? This is through Tuesday evening into Wednesday morning. To see longer term, let's flip this over to the GFS model and start playing this one out. So the system then moves into the Hudson Bay. That's system number 1. The ridge is still sitting down here, and all along its periphery, right into here is where we're going to expect to get the heaviest rain. This is overnight, Monday night into Tuesday morning. So progressing through Tuesday into Tuesday evening, Wednesday early in the morning here, getting through the day on Thursday. What we have to be watching by the time we get into Thursday morning is the development of another low. Good agreement between the European and the GFS on this, taking this low right in through this area, bringing some heavier rainfall in through this corridor. Now, after this low moves through the Great Lakes states and toward the northeast, see it there by Friday early in the morning, we need to be watching for what happens to our temperatures in the north central plains basically early in the morning on Friday. You can see this dominant area of higher atmospheric pressure, clearer skies, lighter winds in here, much stronger winds back through parts of the Dakotas. We need to see who's going to be getting some frost in the northern part of the United States toward the end of this week. But as we play this out, taking you into Friday evening, and into Saturday, I'm going to let the model go ahead and take you out a little bit farther here because I want you to see next weekend we're anticipating another low forming in this area. Very good timing agreement and position agreement between the GFS and the European model. And that low pressure system gets wrapped up here toward the Hudson Bay. And what I really want you to hone in on is by Sunday, its front drag through here. This might finally be the pattern change we need, such that by the 7th, we take this big ridge, shove it through, and behind it, or in front of it, the precipitation finally moves to the southeast. This might be the first time we get meaningful rainfall across the southeast in a long time. But again, this is still another week away from us here. All right, putting it all together, take a look at what the upper level flow pattern is doing. We need to shake this. We got to get rid of this deep trough here. Well, we see the first trough exit. See, there it goes, shooting on up there by Thursday. Another trough reinforces coming in toward the end of the week into the northwest. But it's a little bit different. It's not as deep, which is good. And that trough sweeps across the United States. See it there? And that might be the one that finally breaks the pattern. Now, what helps it is we change things up over Greenland. We change things up in the Pacific Ocean. That high or low pattern I talked about last week finally emerges. And right there, what we see is it tends to get rid of the deeper troughs that just stay in place over the west. And because that high or low pattern emerges, it tends to flatten out the flow of the jet stream once we get into the 9th, 10th, 11th of the month. Now remember, out this far, we're past 10 days here. The model spread kind of averages everything out and kind of we lose some of the deeper features. But it is not as though we're completely shaking the active pattern. But remember my longer term analysis we gave over the last couple of weeks. We had thought that by the time we get to mid-month, we could possibly be clearing out the very active pattern through the midsection of the United States. The models are still advertising that, although it's not a slam dunk and a guarantee. All right, so out here toward the 15th, the first week of October is still going to be quite chaotic, but I hope that beyond that, given some of the teleconnections I've been paying attention to across the open ocean here in the Western Pacific, we might finally get there with that forecast. What are temperatures going to do? Well, let's just take a look here from our national blended model. Let me take you back here. Monday morning's lows, Tuesday morning lows, Wednesday. So we still see broad frost threat in the western high plains here Wednesday. By the time we get into Thursday, this is Thursday morning temperatures, you can see them spreading much closer to kind of the midsection here of the Dakotas, getting into western Nebraska, where we could see some below freezing temperatures. This is now getting into the fourth Friday. Now it starts to spread here over to northern Minnesota, northern Wisconsin. And then temperatures rebound after that in the midsection of the country on the 5th, 6th, and 7th, okay? So it's just throughout the middle of this week, we need to be watching for where that frost is going to be progressing over the next couple of days, moving again through parts of the high plains, the western sides of North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, and then eventually over toward the northern parts of the Great Lakes states here. That's our main frost region we're watching for the next few days. Now, in addition to that, this area needs to be picking up a lot more heat than this. If we just look overall, this whole area kind of north of this line that I'm drawing right in through here, not anticipating picking up more than 100 growing degree day units over the next 9 days. And we still need in this area a few hundred more for a crop that was planted late. So this is not ideal way to finish up the season. Again, this is total accumulated growing degree day units over the next 9 days. So to show you those temperature patterns over the next 5 days, still highly amplified like this, and this of course induced by the snow cover here, but very, very hot down here in the southeast. The pattern breaks down toward the end of the week and the trough moves, and we finally start to feel a little bit more like fall in this corridor. But we do notice that the jet stream tends to want to go back into a trough somewhere along the western United States, getting out to day 10 and 11 before maybe this trough starts to be more of a feature in the Gulf of Alaska with time. So certainly the highly amplified pattern is evolving in the coming days. To finish this up, I'm going to just take you quickly to the tropics. At the end of last week, we were talking about watching a system coming out of the Caribbean and moving toward basically the Gulf of Mexico here. This is just looking over the next 4 or 5 days here at the probability of getting a tropical depression to form. I'll be concerned about this if it does get into the Gulf of Mexico toward the end of this week. It's something to watch. Outside of that, the only other tropical system that will be influencing the United States will be coming out of the East Pacific, bringing moisture in like this, which we talked about earlier in this video. To finish up, I want to give you some more information about South America. Was watching over the weekend for some of the reasons why we keep stalling out in MJO phase 1, and a lot of this has to do with several other factors which we detailed in the long-range outlook that came out last Wednesday, specifically the Indian Ocean dipole, what's currently going on with the trade winds in the Central Pacific, and the positive phase of the Pacific Decadal Oscillation aren't letting what appears to be the MJO not get out of phase 1. And as a consequence, we are seeing this precipitation pattern again over the next 15 days. Now, folks, right in through here, this is Mato Grosso, is broadly the area that I just circled. Farmers here are still waiting on more precipitation to get that crop, the soybean crop, to go in and germinate with plenty of moisture. So there's still more is needed in this area, and certainly very dry still in parts of eastern Brazil. So this isn't kind of the green light just yet on planting, but I will at least show you this. Compared to a year ago, we can see that the vegetative health index is much below what it was a year ago. And over the last month, they have still been in deficit in rainfall here, as you can see in the map over there on the right. So a lot more rain is needed before the green light goes for planting here in South America, here in Brazil. In addition to that, something to think about here is maybe not so much the influence on the first crop beans, but what it might mean for safrinha cotton and safrinha corn. So that's a couple of things we have to pay close attention to in the coming days, weeks, and months. All right, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up right here. We at Nutrien, thank you for your attention. Hope you have a great week. Stay tuned to all of our content coming out this week as we have a very active pattern moving across the U.S. Talk to you soon. Thank you.